Welcome to all of you to our Vedanta Society of Greater Austin Bhagavad Gita class. And I'll begin as always with the chant. Let's see, let me set this back so, okay. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, we meditate on you who were made known to Partha by the Lord Narayana himself. You who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. You, the goddess, who rains down the nectar of Advaita, non-dualism in 18 chapters. You, the destroyer of relative existence. We worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the delight of his mother Devaki, the slayer of the demons Kamsa and Chanura. We adore that supremely blissful Madhava, Krishna, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So now we'll begin with the Gita where we left off last time. Last time we were studying the Sthita Prajna Lakshanas, the characteristics of the person of steady wisdom, Sthita Prajna. Sthita Dhi, Sthita Prajna refers to the same thing. One of Sthita Dhi, one of steady awareness, steady intelligence, steady buddhi, and Sthita Prajna, one of steady wisdom. So it refers to the same thing. And now we are to begin on verse 65. So in verse 54, Arjuna asks a question, Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha? Who is said to be a Sthita Prajna? Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha? Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha? Samadhistasya Keshava. How is one who is established in Samadhi? Sthita Dhi kim prabhasheta. Oh, I know it so well now. Out of context, I'm missing it. Sthita Dhi kim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. So what is the definition, O Madhava, of the person of steady wisdom, absorbed in contemplation, that is samadhistasya? How does a person of steady wisdom talk? How does such a one walk? And how does he sit? And so the rest of this chapter is an answer to that question, or what about the nature of the Sthita Prajna. And so now we've come to verse 65, and we'll just start right in from there now. 65 says, Prasade sarva dukkhanam hani rasyopajayate prasanna chetaso hyashu buddhi paryavatishthate. So this says that when one is established in equanimity of mind or serenity of mind, when one is established in serenity of mind, prasade, sarva dukkhanam hani, asya sarva dukkhanam hani upajayate. For such a one, for the sthita prajna who has been established in serenity of mind, there's the destruction, the complete destruction of misery. How is that possible, that the misery could be destroyed? Because we find that misery is woven into the whole of our lives. Yes, we have happiness sometimes, we have good times, we have bad times, but all through it, even in the good times, there's some insufficiency, some feeling of lack that's woven through everything. That's what drives us on, what drives us to do more and more, to get more and more, to experience more and more, to learn more and more. So in one sense, it's the basic motivating factor in life, the fact that all through life we find insufficiency, that life is insufficient. It's sometimes happy, sometimes sad, but even when it's happy, it's not happy enough. We want it even more, we want it even bigger, we want it to last longer. And then surrounding moments of happiness, there are moments of unhappiness as well. And so that's the way life seems to be, misery woven into the very fabric of life. So how could one come out of misery altogether so that there is no misery? That we come to only when we have transcended this world, because the nature of this world is it's a world of dvandva, a world of duality, a world of pairs of opposites, where sometimes we're happy, the next moment we're unhappy. Sometimes we are successful, other times we fail. Sometimes we're too hot, sometimes we're too cold. And so we're always swinging from side to side among the pairs of opposites. So it's only by transcending the pairs of opposites, which includes, we can't do that unless we can transcend the body and the mind. So when we have known that which is beyond the body and mind, then we come to that which nothing in this world can touch. And even though others see us experiencing the world, from the inside, we know that nothing touches us. So we see that in the highest saints, people like Sri Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi, the Holy Mother and others. In the case of Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, you see that they themselves had all kinds of experiences, difficult experiences and happy experiences and things. But in the midst of all of that, their mind was ever serene because they didn't identify with any of it. You see, when Sri Ramakrishna had cancer of the throat, and there was so much pain, he could hardly swallow, and he could hardly take any food. If you see that picture of him after he passed away, when he's lying on the cot, ready to be cremated, he's just skin and bones. There's no flesh left hardly. And so at that time, he could hardly eat, so much pain. Remember, this is in the time when they didn't have morphine and other things. So much pain he was in all of the time. And so once in that condition, he asked Hari, that is later Swami Turiyananda, that you see, I am suffering so much. What do you think? And Hari said, but I see that you are always immersed in bliss and that this doesn't touch you at all. And then Sri Ramakrishna laughed and said, you rascal, you found me out. Meaning that even in the midst of that cancer of the throat, which would be so terribly painful, that his mind was ever absorbed in bliss. And you look at someone like Ramana Maharshi, the same thing. Now you see someone like Swami Vivekananda, and Swami Vivekananda, sometimes he seems to be on the top of a spiritual wave where he's unaffected by everything, and other times he's down He's down where he's suffering from a variety of things. But with Swamiji, we have to remember that Sri Ramakrishna, or the Divine Mother, because we don't see a difference between the two, but Sri Ramakrishna or the Divine Mother had pulled a thin veil of ignorance over his spiritual consciousness. That is, a thin veil of Maya, so that he had the sense of doership, so that he could do the work. Had he not had that, he couldn't have traveled to America and done all of and England and done all of the things he did, establishing the Ramakrishna mission. He would have remained in a state of high consciousness where he couldn't take that kind of initiative. He couldn't engage in battles with the Christian missionaries in Detroit and other things he had to do. So it's because Sri Ramakrishna had pulled a thin veil of Maya, which Sri Ramakrishna said was the thinnest veil of Maya over his eyes, so that he had that spiritual knowledge from his samadhi, but he couldn't quite get back to it. And so in that state, he was oftentimes on the heights of spiritual experience, and sometimes he seemed bereft of it. Not bereft of spiritual knowledge, but not able to get back to that which was his, you could say, his birthright, which was his natural state. And that's because of that thin veil of Maya pulled over him, so that he could work. Otherwise, he couldn't have done it. So you find that Ramana Maharshi, a great, great saint, but this kind of thing was outside of Ramana Maharshi's experience. The fact that Sri Ramakrishna had the spiritual power to pull that veil of Maya over Swamiji's eyes. So you see Ramana Maharshi saying that he didn't think Swami Vivekananda had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because how could he go around the world teaching and establishing monasteries and doing all of these things if he were established in a high state? Well, that's because he didn't understand the possibility of someone like Sri Ramakrishna, who was not just a saint, but an avatara, Ishvara himself, who had the power to pull the thin veil of Maya over Swamiji's consciousness in order to allow him to do the work that was necessary to be done. But you find that in Swamiji's life, by the time he comes to California in 1900, the end of 1899 and first half of 1900, that there he's always in a very high state, that now his work is ending. And so again, that veil is lifting. And he mentions that in his letters at that time in the first half of 1900. That now that veil of ignorance is lifting from his mind, and he's perpetually in a very high state. So Swamiji's case was somewhat unique. But anyway, coming back to the verse, it first says, Prasade sarva dukkhanam hanirasyopadjayate. For such a one, the Sthita Prajna, in a state of serenity, who is established in a state of serenity, there's the destruction of all misery. Misery has disappeared. The very possibility of misery has disappeared. And the second half of the verse says, Prasanna chetaso hyashu buddhi paryavatishtate. And so the state of wisdom, the buddhi of the serene-minded one, prasanna chetas, one who has a serenity of mind. So the intelligence or the wisdom of one whose mind has become serene, ashu paryavatishtate. Soon, ashu paryavatishtate is established, is fully established. Paryavatishtate. So when the serenity of mind is attained, there results the destruction of all his misery. Verily, the wisdom of the serene-minded one gets steady soon, or is soon established. The wisdom of the serene-minded. And so for us, what does that mean? Again, when reading any spiritual book, try to understand what the book is saying or the text is saying, and then ask, what does that mean to me? What can I do with this? We always have to ask that when studying spiritual books, because they are meant to teach us, to lead us. As Sri Ramakrishna said, they are like a grocery list, a shopping list that tells us the things we need to get. And so this means that if we can attain to serene mindedness, then we will soon come to the state beyond all misery. So serene mindedness means in the midst of all of the experiences of life, to learn to hold the mind steady. So the ultimate state is not just to be steady in the midst of all the experiences of life. The ultimate state is to realize God, to realize the self. And then we are spontaneously established in complete serenity of mind. But as a practice, that if we can learn to be even-minded in the experiences of life, if happiness comes, let it come. Don't get too excited. If misery comes, let it come. Don't get upset. Face all the experiences that come to us in life. Learn to face everything with even-mindedness. So in that state, we are still experiencing misery. When a bad experience comes, we still feel the effects of it. But we keep our mind serene in the midst of it, just by an effort of control. So that is practice. That's not attainment. Attainment means when the mind is completely established in serenity and it never deviates, and no misery can touch us because we have separated our consciousness from the body and the experiences of the body. And so then we are established in that serenity. So there's practice where we're trying, and then there's attainment. So what we have to do, because we haven't attained that yet, what we have to do is to practice. Swami Swahananda, as I've sometimes have quoted him here, Swami Swahananda used to say that he would, as I've said before, Swami Swahanandaji was the multiple choice Swami when he was teaching. When you asked him a question, he would say, well, you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do this, or you could do that. Choose whichever one you want. So he'd always give you choices. And for some people, that was great, because then you felt that you had a choice that you wanted to make. You weren't stuck. For other people, it was terribly frustrating because they wanted Swamiji to tell them, do this. But Swami wouldn't do that. He would say, well, try this, or try that, or try that, or try that. And so he would often look at every problem when people would bring a problem to him, a question, look at every problem from the standpoint of the 4 yogas. And so he would often say that if you want to be a yogi, Raja Yogi, then just make a strong determination. I'm not going to let anything upset my mind. I'm going to keep my mind calm in the midst of all circumstances. So just make that determination. I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to keep my mind calm. And so that is the way of the Raja Yogi. And that's what we do with a verse like this. Learn that if I can attain serene mindedness, if I attain it completely, problem solved forever, eternally. I have come out of ignorance eternally. But even now, if I haven't become established in that perfectly, I'm trying to remain even-minded. Even then, we get great benefit. We find that whatever happens, that we remain centered, we remain calm, we remain with our intelligence intact. We don't get carried away by the experiences of life. So as a practice, that's a wonderful thing. So again, to read the translation again, when this serenity is attained, there results the destruction of all of one's misery. Verily, the wisdom of the serene-minded one gets very soon. So one gets very soon once one has attained to this serenity. And then verse 66 says, Nasti buddhir ayuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhavayata shanti rashantasya kutas sukham. So buddhi ayuktasya buddhi na asti. Of one who is not self-controlled, of one who is not, for one who is not self-controlled, there is no intelligence. If we don't have self-control, we find that the lack of self-control destroys our intelligence. So for the yogi, if we want to be yogis, in the midst of everything, we should try to maintain some sense of self-control. That's a part of serene mindedness, is the sense of self-control. So whatever we're doing, it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy good food. If we eat something good, we know it's good, we enjoy it, but we don't get carried away. Yes, we take it. It's good, it tastes good. I enjoy it. But we just leave it at that. We don't start dancing. And if something unfortunate happens, we remain calm, remain with the mind undisturbed. So if we can do that, then we find that our intelligence stays clear and stays effective. And so, again, for the uncontrolled person, there is no buddhi, there is no intelligence. And then nacha yuktasya bhavana. And for the uncontrolled person, ayuktasya, there is no bhavana, that is, there is no meditation. Bhavana here means a steady stream of thought, and so it means meditation. So for one who is not self-controlled, meditation is not possible. So if we want to learn meditation, we have to, at the same time, practice self-control and even serene-mindedness in the midst of all circumstances. Again, not that we attain it just because we practice it, we'll attain it in time. But even as a practice, it's a great help to us. If we practice even-mindedness, if we practice self-control, maintaining some sort of control of the mind in all circumstances, happiness and misery both, then we find that we're able at the time of meditation to meditate more effectively. So for the uncontrolled person, there's no knowledge, nor is there meditation for him. And then the second half of the verse, nacha bhavayata shanti. So nacha abhavayata shanti. For one who has no meditation, there is no peace. If we can't meditate to some extent at least, if we can't calm the mind, internalize the mind for some time at least in meditation, then we have no peace. And ashantasya kuta sukham. And for the one who is not peaceful, where is happiness? If we have no peace, where is happiness? So as I say sometimes, people come to people like me and say, Maharaj, I wish I could just tell my mind to shut up, just to be quiet and leave me alone. The mind is going like a Vishnu's chakra. No, learning to keep the mind under some control at all times. That's not something heavy. It's not something somber and heavy and terribly difficult and painful. No, just keeping the mind calm and sattvically calm. There's you can try to calm the mind in a tamasic way by just beating the mind and by force trying to control it and suppressing it. No, that's not what we want. We want sattvic calmness, sattvic serenity, where the mind just of its own, it enjoys being in a controlled state and just wants to stay there clear-minded. So that's what we want to attain, not suppression of the mind by force. I've got to control my, no, just gradually stepping back and allowing the mind to calm down. You know, I'm going to remain controlled in the midst of all circumstances. So again, the translation is, for the uncontrolled person, there is no knowledge or intelligence, nor is there meditation for him. And for the unmeditative person, there is no peace. And for one bereft of peace, how can there be happiness? You know, without peace, happiness is not possible. And so here you see the difference between what most people of the world call happiness and what the spiritual aspirant learns is true happiness. That is, for most people, happiness is oftentimes a state of high excitation. You want something, you're desiring something, and you finally get it after after a long struggle, and you're so happy, you dance up and down, you call all your friends and say, look what I got, I finally did it, I did it. And you're so excited. And in the midst of that excitement, you find that there is a disturbance of mind. There is a much higher type of happiness, which is the calm happiness of the detached mind, of the serene mind. And so it's that happiness that we want, not the excited happiness that makes us jump up and down. So that doesn't mean, again, religion is not a somber affair, not a sad or a difficult affair. It doesn't mean that if something nice happens to you, that you can't be happy that something nice happens. Yeah, it's happy. Be happy. And there's nothing wrong in being happy. Try to be happy all of the time. But remember that excitement is not the same as happiness. So in that excited state, when we get what we are longing for and we're all excited, there's a mixture of happiness and excitement, which lowers the quality of happiness. So the happiness, which is calm happiness, is a far superior thing. And eventually, through the practice of japa and meditation and prayer and so forth, we begin to experience a little bit of that. And then we see the difference between that and what most people consider to be happiness. Then we want this, we don't want that. So we try to stay in this. So then verse 67 says, Indriyanam hicharatam yanmano nuvidhiyate tarasya harati prajñam vayur navamivam bhasi. So here, Indriyanam hicharatam yanmano nuvidhiyate. When the mind follows whichever of the senses are outgoing, the eyes want to see, the ears want to hear, the skin wants to touch, the tongue wants to taste, the nose wants to smell. And so they're always leading us outside, trying to grasp their respective objects. And so when the mind is allowed to follow after the senses, now that doesn't mean we can't open our eyes and see something or open our ears and hear something, but it means that when the mind is dragged by the senses, it's not that we need to see something or we want to see something, but the eye catches something and we have to follow it. Or there's a sound and we have to listen to it, even though we're trying to concentrate on a book or a study or something, but there's a sound and the mind has to follow it. And so when the mind is controlled by the senses, when the mind follows any of the senses, then the wisdom is stolen from one. Harati, prajñam harati. Vayu navam iva ambasi. Like like a ship in the wind at sea. So, putting it all together, whichever of the wandering senses the mind follows, yanmano nuvidhiyate, whichever of the senses, the five senses, the mind follows after, that takes away his wisdom, just as the wind carries away a ship at sea. So just as the wind in a sailing ship, it blows a ship even to its own destruction, even to its own sinking. The wind can destroy a ship at sea. And so when we follow the senses, not because there's something to see or hear or smell or taste, but because we just can't control them. It's not that we want to do it for a particular reason, but just the mind has to follow because it's a slave of the senses. Then our wisdom is carried away just as the ship is carried away by the wind at sea. So the running translation says, whichever of the wandering senses the mind follows, that one, that sense, carries away his wisdom as the wind ship on the sea. So it carries away one's wisdom like the wind carries away a ship at sea. So that means, what do we do with that? There's the practice of Shama and Dhamma. Shama and Dhamma. Shama means not to let the mind follow after the senses just because the senses are trying to drag it. And Dhamma means controlling the sense organs themselves, the physical organs. So together, they go together, controlling the mind from following after the senses and also controlling the senses themselves. And so remaining calm at all times and not being completely distracted by the senses and the things that are coming in through the senses to our awareness. So to remain centered and calm, peaceful, serene in the midst of all of the experiences that come to us, so that our intelligence is not carried away like a ship by the wind at sea. So then verse 68 says, Tasmad yasya mahabaho nigrihitani sarvashaha indriyan indriyartebhyas tasya prajna pratisthita. So therefore, O Mahabaho, one whose senses are controlled from their sense objects, that is, one who has the power to refrain all of the senses from their objects, he has attained to steady wisdom. Tasya prajna pratisthita. His wisdom has become steady. His wisdom is established. So therefore, O mighty armed one, Mahabaho, he whose senses are well controlled from their objects has steady wisdom. So again, how does a person of steady wisdom act? How do they talk? How do they sit? How do they walk? Arjuna asked Sri Krishna. So again, all of these verses are part of the answer to that. So in the midst of the world of the senses, such a one sits steady, not a slave of the senses, not being pulled here and there unwittingly by the senses to their objects, but who sits steady, who sees that which he wants to see, hears that which he wants to hear, etc. Thinks that which he wants to think, but is not a slave of the senses and of the mind. So that we have to practice self-control, practice serenity of mind, practice not allowing the senses to pull me here and there. So whenever we find that we're distracted and we're unmindful and daydreaming and thinking all kinds of thoughts and things, when we catch ourselves, then just to bring ourselves into the center. If we have a mantra, then that's a very good way to, when we catch ourselves just being completely distracted and running after the senses and thinking unconscious thoughts and daydreaming and all of that, then to come back to the mantra and just calmly repeat it to bring the mind back into calmness. That's a great practice. So then we come to verse 69, which is a famous verse. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato mune. So ya nisha sarva bhutanam, that which is night to all beings, that which is night to all beings, tasyam jagarti samyami. The self-controlled one is awake in that. So what is night to all beings, there the self-controlled one is awake. Yasyam jagrati bhutani, and that in which ordinary beings are wide awake. Sa nisha pashyato mune. That is night to the sage who sees correctly. So that which to all creatures is night is where the man of self-control is wide awake. And that in which all creatures are wide awake is night to the sage who sees. So that means that you see all the people around us, the ordinary people, the great majority of people have no spiritual life. Even those who go to temples and to churches and to synagogues and so forth, most of them do it as a routine thing. as a transactional thing. Well, let me go to church because it makes me feel better. Let me go to the temple and make an offering, and then maybe my child will get better grades in school. Let me do this, let me do say this, so repeat the chandi, and maybe that will help my husband get a better job or something like that. So it's all transactional. Let me do things in order to improve my life here. So for most people, religion means something that helps us improve this ordinary life of ours. And for most people who are not at all religious, then of course all they're concerned about is practical means of improving this life. So a religious person, most religious people use religion to try to improve this life. And ordinary people, non-religious people, they use just ordinary means, their own cleverness to try to improve this life. And so that to the sage is night, because the sage realizes that that's not where happiness is to be found. That's not where I am to find fulfillment. And so they see that as night, that which is daytime to the ordinary person, meaning the realm of this world, where this world is so important. Success is so important, enjoyment is so important, health is so important, all of that, that to the sage, that is like night, because they have given up the importance of that. Now, let me say that for most of us, we as spiritual aspirants, seeking God, not just transactional blessings because we made some donations or something, but those of us who are seeking to find God, seeking to have a spiritual life, then we are in the in-between state, where this life is still important to us because it's what we have, it's what we experience. So this doesn't mean that that immediately when you start on the spiritual path that you don't even think about this world. No, you still have to pay bills, you still have to have income to support yourself, you still have to cook food, and all of these things you have to do. So we're in an in-between state. But in this in-between state, we have to again and again tell the mind, until the mind finally accepts it, that this is not where I'm going to find happiness. Yes, this is what I'm aware of, and I have to do things in order to live on this plane, otherwise I can't even live. Sharira yatra pichate na prasidhyera. Sri Krishna tells Arjuna in the third chapter, which we're coming to shortly, that even the maintenance of the body is not possible unless we work. And so we have to do things here. But let us convince ourselves that happiness, full contentment, the solution to all of life's problems is there. That is in the attainment of God. And so do what I have to do here and do it well so that it comes out well. But this is not where I'm going to solve life's problems. I pay my bills and think that now I can rest easy. I paid all of my bills this month. But next month you have a mailbox full of bills again. You have to do the same thing. So here is not the realm where we can solve our problems. Here we just have to deal with the problems as they come up so that we can continue. But it's there in the spiritual reality that we will solve our problems. So then the second half of the verse is the corresponding part. Yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha paschyato munehi. That which is night to all beings, there the sage is awake and sees. No, I'm sorry. That there where all beings are awake, there the sage is asleep. That's night to the sage. So that means that where ordinary beings are so focused, where all of their attention goes, it's so important this world and having the things of this world and enjoying this world and success in this world, that is no longer important to the sage. That has become like night. And so you see in the life of great saints that they're all like that they get to the point where they have attained to wakefulness in God. and the world has been put to sleep for them. They no longer are affected by the things of the world. So again, we are in the in-between state, where we're partly awake to that and partly awake to this. And but in this state, what we have to do now is to convince ourselves that the final solution to life's problems is by getting there. And so let me do what I have to do here, facing the problems of this life, because there's no other way. This is what I'm experiencing now, so I have to deal with it. I can't escape it. I have to deal with it. But remember that this world is not, the problems of this world cannot be solved on their own terms. They can only be patched up for the time being. They're solved by going to the other side, to the other shore of samsara, to the other shore of life. So that which to all creatures is night is where the man of self-control is wide awake. And that in which all creatures are wide awake is night to the sage who sees. And so that's why people thought that Sri Ramakrishna was mad. Not because he was mad, but and not because his behavior was that of a madman walking around talking to himself and things like that. No, they thought he was mad because he was asleep to the things of this world. That which was so important to everyone else, that made no difference to him. And he was awake to the transcendent world. He was awake to the Divine Mother, which other people couldn't see. And so they thought that he was mad because he didn't care about anything that they cared about. And all of his attention seemed to be somewhere that they didn't understand. And so that's why he appeared mad. So now verse 70 is a very beautiful verse. Apuryamanam machalah pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kama kami. So just as the ocean is receiving water from all of the rivers of the world, all of the rivers, including the Ganges and the Kaveri and the Godavari and the Amazon and the Mississippi and all of the Nile, all of the great rivers of the world are constantly pouring their waters into the ocean. Apuryamanam is being filled on all sides by all of these rivers and all of these streams. Samudramapa pravishanti yadvat. Achalam pratishtam. So just as it's receiving all of these waters, and yet it remains achalam. Achala pratishtam. It remains established in steadiness, in unmovingness. So the image is the ocean is receiving the waters from all of these rivers all over the world, and yet the ocean is always the same. It's unaffected by the waters of the rivers pouring into it. So tadvat, in the same way, kama yam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti nakam nakami. So in the same way, the objects of desire are constantly entering into the sage, and yet his mind is unaffected. So here it actually says kama, which means desires. But it's often interpreted as the objects of desire, because it's not that he has desires. So it's the occasion of desire is entering into him, because such a sage, he has eyes, he has ears, he has a tongue. So the desires which are natural to other people, those come to him also, but he is completely unaffected, just as the ocean is unaffected by all of the rivers pouring into it. So when you think of it as a beautiful analogy, that the heart of the sage is like the ocean. It's unperturbed by anything. Sri Ramakrishna used to give another example with the ocean, and that is that when an elephant plunges into a pool, it splashes water everywhere, and half of the water of the pool may be gone if it's a small pool. But if an elephant enters into the ocean, it makes no difference to the ocean whatsoever. The ocean is undisturbed. And so let the elephants of sense objects and sense experiences enter into us, but let us remain like the ocean. So to keep that analogy in mind, the ocean is a beautiful metaphor for various things in spiritual life, but largely it's a beautiful, for one thing, it's a beautiful metaphor for the infinite. That you go to the ocean and you look out and you see, you can't see the other shore. The water just goes on forever and ever. And so it's easy to think of the infinite when you're on the seashore, but also to think of the ocean as the heart of the sage, that which I want. So in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that one, in the first chapter, he gives a series of different meditations that one can use. And one of the meditations is to meditate on the heart of a sage. And so to meditate on the heart of a sage, you can use this verse. The heart of a sage is like the ocean, which is unmoved by all of the waters entering into it, all of the experiences entering into it. The heart of the sage is unmoved by anything, always serene, infinite in its extent. So then verse 71, we'll finish this chapter today and then close. Verse 71 says, Vihaya kamanya sarvan pumams charati purushaha. No, I'm sorry. Vihaya kamanya sarvan pumams charati nispriha nirmamo nirahangara sashanti madhigacchati. So vihaya kama, kaman vihaya, sarvan kaman vihaya, pumams sarvan kaman vihaya. So that person who has given up all sense objects, all desires or all sense objects, charati nispriha, and moves about without any desire, nirmamo, without any sense of mind, nirahankara, without any sense of I. So no sense of I and mine, no sense of ego, and no sense of possessiveness. These are my things. Sashanti madhigacchati, such a one attains to eternal peace. Such a one attains to peace who has given up the desire, all of them, and moving among the objects of desire remains without desire, nispriha, who is without a sense of possession. These are my things, without a sense of ego, ahankara. Sashanti adhigacchati, such a one attains to perfect peace. So that's a very state. So when we read something like that, it sounds impossible for us. But no, we have to remember that countless people over thousands of years have attained to this state, people like us. And so it's not impossible, but it also doesn't come quickly and easily. So what we have to do is to remember that this is the goal. This is the direction I want to go. And every step I take in that direction is of great benefit to me. So let me go as far as I can in this life. I can't give up all of my desires because they won't give me up, then I can simplify them. I can simplify them. And when I find myself desiring something that I don't need, there's no need for it, it's just the mind wants to desire something, then just say, I don't need that, don't need that. It's all right, let me live simply. And then nirmamo, reducing the sense of possessiveness. This is mine, this is mine, this is mine. To gradually work against that tendency of possessiveness and nirahankara, that sense of asserting the ego, that I'm going to do this and I'm going to tell that person, I'm going to straighten them out and so forth. No, to lessen that sense of ego. Then gradually we begin to experience more and more peace by going in this direction. Attaining it is the ultimate state. Then we're perfected. Then we have attained to the... But along the way, which is what we are now, trying for that, then we simplify our desires. We get rid of the hankerings of the mind that we don't really need, which serve no purpose, which are just sort of idle hankerings, and simplify our lives. Simplify my sense of possession, simplify my ego, and then I will begin to attain more and more peace. And the final verse of the chapter says, Esha Brahmi Stiti Partha Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati Stitvasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Richati. So here he sums up this part of chapter 2 on the Stita Prajna Lakshanas, the qualities of the person of steady wisdom. Esha Brahmi Stiti Partha. O Partha, this is the state of establishment in Brahman. This is what is called being established in Brahman. This is the Brahmi state, the state of being established in Brahman. Na enam prapya vimukhyati, or enam prapya na mukhyati. Having attained this, one is not deluded. Having attained to this state, the Brahmi sthiti, this state of identity with Brahman, one is not deluded again. That's the end of all delusion. Then you have gone beyond the very possibility of delusion. Stitvasyam antakalepi, having been established in which, at the end of life, Brahma Nirvanam Richati, one attains to Nirvana in Brahman. Brahma Nirvana. That is Nirvana. That is, Nirvana, of course, means literally being snuffed out. And so this means that your individuality is merged into Brahman, snuffed out in that sense, that your individuality is merged into Brahman. So this, the running translation says, is the Brahmi state, O Partha. Attaining it, one is not again deluded. One who rests in it even at the time of death attains nirvana in Brahman. Stitvasyam antakalepi, one who even at the time of death rests in this attains to Brahma Nirvana, identity with Brahman. So, again, this is saying that these things which he has taught since verse 55 through 72, that this is the ultimate state. And having attained this, then one is no more deluded. Therefore, we should strive for it. And if it seems like it's far, far away from us, we should always remember that actually that is our true nature, even now, even in the state of delusion, that is our true nature even now. It's just that we have forgotten it. And so spiritual life is just a matter of remembering the truth, just coming back and remembering that which is always the truth. We don't attain to something which didn't exist before. We create it to our spiritual life. No, our spiritual life reminds us of that which we always are, and then we realize it and the whole dream disappears. Just as when we're being chased by a tiger in a dream and we're terrified in the dream, and then because of our terror in the dream, we suddenly wake up and we realize, oh my God, there was no tiger. I was just dreaming. It's okay. It's okay. There's nothing to be concerned about. And so when we wake up from this delusion that we suffer now, then we realize that was always the truth. It was right here. That's who I was. Why didn't I see it? I was thinking that life was like this, that I was like this, that there was this world out there that I was separate from, and that there were all of these miseries and all of these problems. Why didn't I see this? This was the eternal truth. It was always there, and somehow I couldn't see it. And so we should always remember that. When we find that the difficulties of life seem insurmountable, when they seem that they're going to overwhelm us, remember that no, all of this is just like a dream. And in the dream, we always find a way to face the problems of the dream. We can be terrified in dreams. But have you ever noticed that in spite of all of that, if you're having nightmares and all of the problems and all of the things that you may face in a dream, that you never die in a dream? You never die in a dream. It's not fatal. And so in this life also, we can die in this life, of course. But that doesn't mean we disappear. Just this scenery disappears and other scenery appears before us. And so there's no situation in life that we cannot face. We have within us the ability to face any situation, no matter how difficult. Sometimes people go mad because of the difficulties they're facing, but it's not the difficulty that caused their madness. It's the thought that I won't be able to handle it. And the mind breaks because of that fear that I'm not going to be able to handle it. No, we can handle everything. We can handle anything that comes to us in this life. And to remember that all of the problems of this life is just like a bad dream. And that someday I will wake up in God and realize the infinite, ever blissful truth. And know that I am that. The next 3, 4, 5, the next 3 chapters are really on Karma Yoga. Chapter 2 has a lot on Karma Yoga too, but 3, 4, and 5 are dedicated to Karma Yoga. So, okay, so closing chant. Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutastun Vandi Divyaistavaihi Devedai Sangha Parakramo Panishadair Gayandiyam Samaga Dhyana Vastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyantiyam Yogino Yasyandam Navidu Sura Suraganat Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We bow to that Supreme Being, whom Brahma and other gods praise with divine hymns, whose glorious the singers of the Sama hymns sing through the Vedas and Upanishads, whom the yogis see with their mind absorbed in that through meditation, and whose end and beginning neither the gods nor the asuras know. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all.